as promised, for this week's midweek episode, we have Art. At this point, I've lost count of how many times you've come on. It's you and Michelle Collier that are in the running for first place since at
Wow,
least
I'm in
I've
good
joined.
company.
Ken Sugiura from the AJC, Tech's former beat writer, now general columnist, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
At the AJC. So, A, thanks for coming back. B, how is I think I asked this last time you came on, but how is life at the AJC post beat writing days?
My life specifically, or the AJC? I sit here.
I guess those are two very
Yeah,
distinct
they are very
questions.
different questions. I'm really enjoying it. I definitely there are times definitely I miss being at Tech and knowing one program and team really well and knowing all the people. So I do, yeah, there's only times I miss that and because like writing about the Falcons and the Braves and the Hawks and Georgia Tech and whoever else. You don't have nearly the knowledge of those things. At
Right.
least I don't, as you would if as Chad does or Chip Towers, whomever. So
Mm-hmm.
it's always nice to have that when you're writing about one thing. But on the flip side, being able to have a lot more freedom in choosing what you write about and kind of being able to pick and choose and going to Braves playoff games. I guess I didn't this year. I
Yeah.
went to that doubleheader though, which was
Okay.
fun and
Okay.
like
Yeah.
stuff like that. Going
Yeah.
to Falcons training camp and I went out to I was at the Monday night game when they beat Philadelphia, for instance, and
Oh, nice.
being able to experience stuff like that has been a lot of fun. So yeah, I'd say things are going well.
That's nice. I said,
Yeah,
I guess, any sports writer, I hope, is also a general sports fan. So that's got to be a fun way to consume all that and still be able to do your job at the same time in a
yeah, yeah.
more diversified way. Well, you mentioned Georgia. There was a lot of news that came out today,
There
particularly
were.
pertaining these two programs. If you missed it, the 20 JBAT announced today in a letter to everyone, I guess, and in a video that the 2025 version of Tech Georgia, or Clean Old Fashioned Hate, will not be played at Bobby Dodd Stadium as assumed. It will be at Mercedes-Benz Stadium instead, fulfilling the 2025 portion of our contract to play one game a season in Mercedes-Benz Stadium through 2026. The fact we are moving this game specifically was going to come with a price tag, and boy, did we milk Mr. Blank's coffers here. Tech will be getting paid $10 million, just straight up to move this game from Bobby Dodd Stadium to Mercedes-Benz Stadium, which, if the numbers are out there, it's about a 5 times more money than Tech would usually get to host this game at Bobby Dodd, where they make 2 to 3 million in that game in revenue. So it's huge. Ken, we both know we've gone to enough of these games to know it's generally pretty stacked to one's team in the crowd. So, but the
Right.
fact that in the very fast changing and very lawless land of college football right now,
Hmm.
uh, if you could get a $10 million payday in one day, you kind of have to go get the $10 million payday in one day, and especially in Tech situation, knowing their financials.
Yeah, especially in that situation. Before we started, you mentioned like not there are probably some schools that would be willing to say no thanks or we're good,
Mhm.
but Georgia Tech is not one of those.
No.
They've even in good years when I was covering the department, if they were breaking even for the year, that was a good thing. And
Yeah.
obviously now with the lawsuits against the NCAA and changes coming as far as athletic departments themselves now being able to pay athletes that starts in maybe next year, but in coming years,
Yeah. Soon. Very soon.
that's like a 20, 21, $22 million chunk of change that you either A have to, raise more money for or B find $20 million that you can cut out of your budget, which
Yeah. Yeah.
maybe it'll be a little combination of both. But yeah, so in this instance of being offered a $10 million check, yeah, I can certainly understand why Georgia Tech JBAT decided to go in that direction. I thought it was noteworthy that he said it is a one-time
Yep. Just once.
agreement, and it's certainly be I could understand why they'd say like, hey, we can do this every year and just keep those $10 million checks coming. But yeah, so not ideal by any stretch for Tech fans and for the football team for that matter.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, obviously we all know how much money is driving this industry, and that's no secret anymore to
Right.
anybody. So yeah, it's part of the deal.
I think the color and more like in this letter, he has a few paragraphs just about the house settlement, like the a court case that's largely determining the back pay that schools are going to have to
Right.
make to athletes that played previously, and that total across all athletes is going to be about $3 billion. That is billion with a B. Um, and so Tech is going to have to over time pay their share of that
Right.
to cover the folks that played here. We're getting, and once it all adds up, we get less in annual distributions from the ACC, as that part of that gets paid. And yeah, it's like about, he said, a 20 to $22 million salary cap essentially that
Hmm.
is for student athletes, and you have to find ways to pay for that. And he mentioned they have to reduce some expenses, fundraise even more, a la full steam ahead with the stadium renovations and whatnot, and find new ways to get revenue. And I mean, it does help that there is a building a mile away from campus that makes it worthwhile to do something like this. It's not
Right.
like
Yeah.
it's not, a lot of other schools don't have that kind of opportunity to do
Hmm.
something like this. So we are thankfully situated in this regard. If anything, I think it was mentioned that this will help potentially get stadium remodeling done a little bit sooner, if possible,
Hmm.
next year. So we'll see how that pans out. But it's only like a week, maybe, where that
Yeah.
changes. And then if we make the playoff, what happens though? If we have to host a playoff game that year,
Oh,
that's an interesting conundrum that would be good to fall into, I guess.
right. Right.
We don't play it for Bobby Dodd because we're trying to get construction going, but then we have to host a home game
Hmm.
because we made the playoff.
Interesting.
I guess
Yeah.
Mercedes-Benz would be the backup option. I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, I think
But yeah,
that
you bring up a good point about the Benz being an option. I mean, yeah, like it's one of those things I mean, I guess living in Atlanta, you sort of take for granted. But yeah, not every school, even if
uh,
it wanted to do something like this, would have that
right,
option.
yep.
I remember actually when I was an undergrad many years ago at the University of Michigan, Northwestern, they gave up their home game with Michigan and played it at Michigan.
Oh,
And then they played Ohio State. They gave up that game. They played it in Ohio Stadium or Municipal Stadium in Cleveland, their
mm,
old stadium.
mm,
So they didn't. Georgia Tech at least go to that extreme of saying,
right,
"Hey, let's just play our home game in Sanford."
yeah,
And but yeah, yeah, like we've been saying, yeah, there's a lot of bills to pay, and they,
yeah.
they've got to figure out a way to pay them off, and this is a very expedient way to do it.
There's a way to do it. If you are, it is not going to be part of season ticket packages, but Tech fans will be first in line to get seats for tickets for this game. So Tech will be granted the opportunity to fill up the stadium before a Georgia fan could even get their hands on it, or Georgia season ticket holders can get their hands on tickets. There is a way to alleviate that problem we've been having.
Right.
So what I figured out today is that for a freshman coming to Tech now, if you graduate in 3 years, you will not see Georgia play at Georgia Tech.
Oh,
If you
huh,
graduate in 4, you'll see them one time, and if you graduate in 5, you'll see us play at Georgia 3 times, Mercedes-Benz once, and Georgia Tech once,
huh,
which is very strange. I mean, COVID was kind of similar
yeah,
in that realm for me because we just didn't play them and then ended up having to play 2 in a row at Georgia. But like
right,
that's a little different compared to just like, no, we are voluntarily not playing this
right,
game at our own stadium. So I mean, the tradition part of it sucks. Like every game has been back and
yeah,
forth, back and forth, back and forth. And it's just weird to see college football stuff this ingrained into Southeastern culture change
hmm,
for this. But that I mean, I keep saying it. That's just what we're in. That's the world we live in now
right,
with this sport.
yeah,
I would think Georgia, if is one of those schools that doesn't have to do this actually in hindsight. But I mean, I don't think
right,
they're complaining about 25,000 more people being able to go to a game in a
right,
building that
yes,
they have been filling up repeatedly for the last few
hmm,
years at this point for
yeah. I'm sure
various
Georgia's quite
games.
happy with this agreement,
Yeah,
this
yeah.
arrangement. Yeah,
So, nonetheless, all right. Well, that's the news there. I do have an article kind of weighing the pros and cons on our website from therumbleseat.com if you want to check that out. Ken, I need duty to ask what of tech have you picked up this year? I know they've been much more in the forefront of college football between Florida State and a little bit more better TV slots. I would also
right,
note, and just winning. Like they're 5-2 for the first time in 10 years, which is
yeah,
I mean, you were there for that season so, too.
it
So like, I
was.
mean, what stirs up in you seeing Tech play like this finally for the first time in a long time?
Um, yeah, so I've been to I was fortunate enough to go to the game in Ireland. Then I went up to Syracuse and Louisville.
Mhm.
Is that it? Yes, yeah.
Okay.
But I've been able to watch at least parts or most of some of the other ones. but yeah, it's neat to see them being effective and winning games,
Right.
and I don't know that I would have. Well, yeah, I don't know if I was thought they'd be 5-2, but nothing about it is surprising.
Right.
You could even argue that they maybe should have won either against Syracuse or Louisville,
Hmm.
and I mean, I guess you'd also say maybe you wouldn't have thought they would have beaten Florida State, but
Right. Right.
but yeah, so the defense is much better. Haynes King has been playing really well.
Hmm.
The running game still looks good. Obviously the schedule picks up a good bit in the back half,
Yep. Yep.
but yeah, you like their chances. I don't think they're gonna run the table necessarily,
Right.
but yeah, you feel like they've got some momentum. They can keep going, and things that are they feel like they are reliable, not just smoke and mirrors. That should be able to give them a chance in maybe almost every game they play.
Right. Yeah. We've mentioned this a couple times, but it feels like every game we played has gone as you would kind of would expect it to. Like nothing seems fluky about the games we played. Like they all make sense after the
Mm-hmm.
fact of how those went down, whether it be mistakes we made, whether it be Kyle McCord being Kyle McCord for a whole game and not missing a throw. It
Right.
seemed like,
Yeah, that's crazy.
or
Yeah.
Jeff Collins being Jeff Collins last week.
Yeah.
But as you said, like the run game's very, very solid right now. Like
Yeah.
they are doing things that give Tech a shot in any game, which is to kind of dip into the Notre Dame section here. Was not the case last time we played Notre Dame.
No, it was not at
It was
all.
not. We mainly have you here just talk about the history of this series. I was at the 2021 game.
Hmm.
I don't regret going to the 2021 game because I got to go to Notre Dame's beautiful campus in
Uh-huh.
the middle of fall, and I mean, that campus is amazing in fall. Um, but it was still distinctly remember we got the ball down to I don't know 25-ish yard, like kind of in field goal ish range for what our
Uh-huh.
field goal kicking was like back then. I forgot if it was Wesley or Gavin Stewart that was kicking at that point. Um, but I instinctively knew that there was no way we were going to get any points. Just there was just nothing. There was just no possible chance we were going to score. And sure enough, the next play we fumble and Notre Dame brings it back to the house, and
Oh,
that was
yeah, that yeah, no,
and
now you said it, that does,
that
yeah.
was the last time we saw that side of the field. Um,
Wow.
so and we have not Tech has not won since 2007 when they won 33-3, which I was not aware this game existed until today. In all
Okay. I
honesty,
want to say
so
game day was there for them that game.
this
I
was
was
this
before I started covering the team, but I believe I could be wrong. I've often am, but
this was a
it,
Charlie Weiss versus Chan Gailey game
yeah.
in South Bend. Tech has not won
Or
at
no, I'm sorry. That I think the game they made was at Tech. I apologize.
at Tech.
You're right that was in South Bend.
Yeah, so I guess in general, just to walk me through some of just it seems like this is a very storied rivalry, despite they only have played fairly recently after
Right.
a long gap in the middle. Obviously, the Rudy movie is a
Right.
big part of this, and it's just like the novelization of our rivalry. But just I mean, just walk me through what just this rivalry is in plain terms.
Sure. Well, yeah, like I guess one thing that's you point out is we're saying that they haven't played a ton. I mean, obviously, since Notre Dame made the agreement with the ACC, it's become much more
Yes.
frequent. But yeah,
Yeah.
two schools with a solid, both with solid traditions. Obviously, Notre Dame's being much deeper and more a lot more wins. But yeah, I think it's like anytime Notre Dame and anybody plays it, it's noteworthy. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's meant a lot to Tech fans to have them as a an occasional opponent. I let's see, I covered the 14 game, which was or excuse me, 15.
15. Yeah.
Um, and I'll yeah, that I think there's a Aaron Joe who's still on the program. He's in
Hmm.
recruiting general manager. He had a holding call that I think was suspect that called back that brought a touchdown back that would
Hmm.
have been pivotal,
Yeah.
but Tech ended up losing that game. But yeah, that was I mean that was a significant game in that at the time at least because that was coming off of the 14 season and you know Tech's hopes were high for that year with
Yeah.
Justin Thomas
Yeah.
back and so forth and but that was they lost that game and they lost to Duke the next week and dropped out of the polls
Hmm.
and on to a very forgettable season except for
Yep.
one game against Florida State.
Yep.
And then they play it again in Was it 20
It was 2020. So yeah,
twenty
so
twenty? Oh, that
yeah,
was a game at home. That was
yeah.
they wore the Blackwatch uniforms.
Wow, that's right. Yeah,
Another forgettable game for
yeah.
Georgia Tech. 21. It's funny, like yeah, I was a they lost that game 45 nothing, or was
55,
that
I think.
55? And then
50.
Georgia 45 nothing.
Exactly. Yeah,
The
yeah,
100 to nothing finish.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. This is an aside, but it's remarkable to think just how far Tech has come. You know, the idea of losing. I mean, I don't. I, you kind of got used to losing games like that or
Right.
seeing games like that, and like get some distance makes you realize, wow, that really was a very low mark in the program's history.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, it's the 1980 game. I think it was a they. I should know this by heart, but they tied. I think
Let's see here. Yes, 1980. It was a 3-3 game
3-3.
in
Yeah, so
in
they were
Atlanta.
without
Yep.
their quarterback and they had to start Ken Wisenhunt, who was a tight end, and kind of one of the most remarkable games, I think. And I think, you talked to older Tech fans that were
Mhm.
around then. Yeah, I think that's probably a game they cherish, even though it was not a win. I want to say Joe Montana might have been playing with it for Notre Dame at that point. I should know again. But yeah, so in the Rudy game, so there's really memorable moments in the series history for sure.
Yeah, this was Dan David was the head coach back then.
Uh-huh.
Looking at the roster of guys, see who's labeled NFL. We got Dave Durson, John Krim, Blair Keel, Greg Bell, Larry
Blair Keel. I
Moriarty.
think maybe Montana would have gone by then.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
Blair Keel was the quarterback then.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
I
So
can't imagine Joe Montana scoring just 3 points
yeah, that
against
seems
Tech.
odd.
Yeah.
And I mean, for folks that are in our younger audience, we played Notre Dame a bunch in the 70s. Like it was every year from 74 through 81.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, back and forth, back and forth. We only won one of those games. And in fact, I have in my notes the last time Tech won in Atlanta was in 19. We've won twice in Atlanta in this series, 1976 and 1928.
Wow,
Those are the only two
man.
times. And then
What is
1928
the
game.
overall?
It is it's not flattering.
Yeah.
36-1 in Notre Dame's favor.
Oh gosh, I would not have known that.
Yeah, there was also a stretch of games from 1922 to 1929 during the Bill Alexander years.
Uh-huh.
Actually, there was two stretches. There was then and then basically pre-World War II and post-World War II,
Okay.
or like right before it. In it. Yeah. So Bobby Dodd got to coach a couple of these games as well.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and
Going
one
back,
thing, and you probably know this, and I don't know that Bobby Dodd is quoted as saying this, but I think there was a sense that when Tech left the SEC to become an independent, I think there was a sense that Georgia Tech could become an independent kind of and
in that
be
mold.
a almost like the Notre Dame of the South,
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
the strong football tradition, and you can go travel and play to other teams and
Mm-hmm.
be a noteworthy program in that way. It obviously did not work out
No.
in any stretch in that direction, but yeah, there I guess the two are at least loosely related in that way. In that way, also.
Yeah, the history of what could have been is
Yes.
interesting there. Of course, for Tech fans, it's more like what could have been if we stayed in the SEC
Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
versus
yeah. For
done
sure.
done that. But the thing that stuck out to me a lot is just how close these games. I mean, being at Tech during the worst time to be a Tech fan, but like the just how close all these games were, say for the 2007 game. It's just like this was your generic two powerhouse schools just having good powerhouse kind of
Uh-huh.
games
Yeah.
in early season play, and then also the Gator Bowl as well, which Tech won in '99, 35-28. So
Okay.
that was the last yeah, that and 2007 were the last two teams that we won, and basically there since that modern game since '97. I think in context of what this game could be, the Florida State win, the further away we get from it, seems
Right.
less and less impressive.
Right.
And thinking through the ranked wins, like North Carolina, they last year, Tech outright won that game for sure. It's just how loose defense, how defenses decided to take a nap that day on both sides of the ball. Miami, of course, last year was we make one different decision. We're not winning that game.
Right. Yeah.
Pitt was in Brent's first game was not. We realized not a rankable worthy team, and then North
Right.
Carolina again that year they dropped a touchdown to beat us in the final seconds. And then you get to Florida State,
Right.
which now in hindsight, it's like that was not a top 10 team.
Yeah.
That was not even a top 50 team by any stretch of the imagination at this point.
Uh-huh.
Which brings us to this game being like okay, if Tech puts up a fight here, even if they don't even have to win this game,
Right.
but they still have a shot to play the highest quality game against like in Georgia games.
Right.
Georgia's been Georgia against us, but this is the shot for Tech to put the highest quality game against a legit top one, top two tier program in the country
Yeah.
and prove what they can play like against the best teams at home in particular.
Yeah, that's a good way of framing it, I think. Obviously, like you said, Notre Dame is I think are they in the top 10? But
They're
they're
close. They're close.
yeah,
Yeah.
they're definitely a team that could be in the playoff for certain if
Right.
they win the games they're supposed to. Yeah, beating North Carolina and Duke is one thing, but obviously beating Notre Dame would be significant.
Yeah. Yeah.
Something that would be yeah, I guess you'd probably say the biggest win of Brinke's tenure.
Yeah.
But like you say, I think even if you can go toe to toe with them and show we're just as good as you, then I think that's significant. And
Yeah.
it doesn't help you get to a bowl game, but I think it probably with the audience that they're probably going to get for this game, I think it would be a good thing for them to show people, not
Yeah.
beyond the normal viewing audience, maybe of Tech fans, but others that Georgia Tech, their record is legitimate. They
Yeah.
this is a good team that that deserves the respect that it's seeking.
It'll be 3:30 national TV game, and last time we had a game this front and center was the Florida State game. So you got to
Right.
imagine there'll be some repeat audience nationally for a game like this. Look at the rankings. Notre Dame is 12 right now. Keep in mind we also play the current sixth and fifth ranked teams in the country going forward in Miami and Georgia, which I think kind of proves like how much a good showing here would instill a lot of faith that those games can be competitive
Mm-hmm.
too. Miami is Miami, and that's going to be at home, which will be helpful. Georgia will be whatever that ends up being. I'm still not convinced that they're an amazing team yet, but is there any bias in me saying that? Absolutely. Uh, uh, and slash 7-4, some being somewhat informed from last year as
Yeah.
well.
I mean, you could say anything about Miami, really. They could have two
That's
more
true.
losses
Yeah,
without much difficulty.
they've got. I mean, you ask the wrong person, they'll start hurling accusations at ACC refereeing
Right.
for
Yeah.
for those games, which people have said has been kind of been a conference wide issue at this point of how some of those have gone down. I don't think the North Carolina game was that bad in that regard. Nothing seemed to hold us up too much. I've learned what defensive delay of game is this year now.
Uh,
Uh,
that's a new one. Yeah.
that is the point of how the NBA does points of emphasis. It seems to be something like that to keep. If you don't know what it is, basically defense can't impede the quarterback's ability to get his snap count right. And so you can't
Right.
just like start screaming at the line of scrimmage, which I feel
Or
like I should have known
clapping.
that,
Yeah.
or clapping or something that could mess up the signals for a quarterback, which I feel like I should have known considering I was around and helped coach one season of middle school football and did see this get called before. So the 1 year coaching I had, I should have known. But anyways, I guess going forward, I know this isn't your main beat right now, but
Uh-huh.
Tech is probably going to play without Haynes King. They're probably going to play with Zach Pyron, who I know you at least covered some of his time here,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
generally it's understood that like he could have gone and played somewhere else if he wanted to,
Right.
but he chose to stay at Tech, which means that there is someone we got our backup quarterback is a guy who might be able to start at another school
Yeah.
right now, which I don't want us to forget that this game is we are not as shorthanded as we may assume we are. Granted, it's Notre Dame, of course, that's a different level of versus being
Right.
shorthanded against NC's. Like maybe we could be against NC State later in the year, but it's an interesting problem to have in this particular game. It's like you don't know if he's all the way to Haynes King, but he's not
Uh-huh.
all the way to like a true second string quarterback that's going to
Right.
radically change how you play a football game, though.
Yeah. Yeah. No, the 22 season, when Brent, am I, gosh, yeah, it is 22. Yeah.
22, yeah.
22, because 23 is when Haynes played.
Mhm.
But he came on and he was pretty good. He started 3 games.
3, yeah, right, until he broke his
Virginia Tech,
collarbone.
Florida State,
Yeah,
and Miami.
yeah.
The Virginia Tech game in particular, he was
He made a name for himself
the
that day.
best player on the field that day, probably. Yeah,
Yeah,
he was
yeah,
tough. He came through in the fourth quarter. And even the Florida State game, which was his first. They lost, but like you could tell, he had something. And then the Miami game, he got knocked out,
Right.
but again, more than held his own for a kid who was a true freshman and
Yeah.
playing, making his first career starts. And
Right.
so, when that season ended, and I also remembered, how Brink, he just spoke glowingly about him, about his
Hmm.
toughness and poise and so forth. And so certainly when that year ended, you felt like, oh, well, Tech could well have their quarterback for the next 4 years because he only played 3 games there. He
Right.
kept
Yeah.
his red shirt. Obviously, looking at it now, he hasn't played regularly since then, and he's come in and been like
He's the
the
fourth
short
and one.
yardage guy,
Yes. Fourth and one
and
specialist.
so
Yes.
he hasn't been able to throw that much. And I don't know how much they split reps in practice. Obviously, you feel a lot better if you're Tech with Haynes King healthy, but yeah, like you're saying, so many schools I think now they put their money literally, I guess, on the one on your number one guy and
Yeah.
kind of
Go
say
from
that
there.
everyone else like
Yeah.
we're hoping that our number one guy doesn't get hurt. Like you saw that
Yeah.
with DJ Uyunglele,
Hmm.
for instance.
Yeah.
So yeah, not certainly not the worst position for Tech to be in, and maybe even a decent one. If you're going to have a number
Right.
two, I think is about as much as you could hope for.
Yeah. And on the other side of the ball, somehow we have. I say somehow it's very intentional that our run defense has gotten so much better this year and is of the tops in the country, and that's mainly how Notre Dame likes to do offense as well,
Mm-hmm.
is running the ball. Granted, last week we allowed 200 plus yards to North Carolina, but they have a Marion Hampton. You're
All
supposed
right.
to allow 200 yards to a Marion Hampton. Like that's not you haven't done anything. You haven't sucked as a defense if Marion does that to you.
Yeah,
Um,
good assessment. Yeah.
so, but it's like okay, there's there's a path similar to how I felt about Florida State. There's a pathway to maybe to making this at least close,
Mm-hmm.
which is stopping that or doing what you can to contain of what Notre Dame has offensively. I think honestly you just for Tech's offense you just keep going as you have been. Like
Mm-hmm.
doesn't nothing much needs to change. Byron knows the plays. Like he's been doing this for 2 years. It's not like he
Right.
doesn't know what to do here.
Right. Yeah.
And arguably his arm might be stronger right now, considering it seemed like, I mean, see, very much it seems like, but some of Haynes' throws in North Carolina, at least to my eye, did not look terribly strong from the press box, and eventually it looked like something was up, maybe with his shoulder. We don't know. They haven't said anything,
Yeah.
and they don't have to say anything for the most part.
Right.
But it was clear it wasn't the zip wasn't super zippy last week. So, um,
Moderate zip. Yeah.
all that to say, this could be worse, and we're not out of this yet.
Yeah.
I think is the takeaway I'd say for right now on a Tuesday night. I've had to think about this game.
Yeah. Yeah. It could be a lot worse. And I again, it's the one thing you wonder about is the rust and how much has he been getting
Mhm.
practice time and to be able to stay sharp. I would suspect at least some.
Yeah,
But yeah, even with Haynes King in, it was going to take
be a lot. Yeah,
maybe the best effort of the year, and that remains the same.
yeah,
And
and
maybe so
they
we'll
play
see.
up to teams. They play up to teams like they played
Right,
up to Georgia last year pretty well. Granted,
right, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Georgia wasn't playing everybody that game because I'm pretty sure
Uh-huh.
Bowers wasn't in, and if they had played Bowers, we're talking about a very different kind of game.
Yeah,
I think,
yes, yeah.
all things considered. I mean, you could say maybe Louisville shot ourselves in the foot a little bit.
Uh-huh.
Syracuse shot ourselves in the foot a little bit there.
Right,
Also, neither of those games existed with a fully healthy Jamal Haynes, who is now fully healthy and
right,
has
right.
run all over the place the last 2 games.
Uh-huh.
I mean, he set his career high with the 68 yarder.
Right.
Also, I got to say, as you know me being in the press box, I had to do everything I could to contain myself in there when that run busted out. I'm like, I can't say anything,
Yeah.
but my head.
Something tells me you probably weren't the only one.
I hope not.
But
I hope
yeah,
not. But oh man, it took some willpower in the
yeah,
moment right there. Uh, but yeah, no, this is doable. It's not likely, but it's doable.
yeah. And then the thing is, like, I mean, I think this year in particular, it seems like, and I think that it's become kind of the growing trend is the wrong word, but just the way that college football has changed with the portal and NIL. I think teams they have less depth, and are
Sure.
more susceptible. Obviously,
Yeah.
no one more so than Notre Dame. They
Yeah,
lost to
Northern
a
Illinois.
team that
Yeah, yeah,
Georgia Tech fans are familiar with,
yeah. Uh-huh.
Northern
Yeah.
Illinois.
Yep.
But yeah, Georgia almost no, they did almost lost, but they Mississippi State, the worst team in the SEC, gave them a hard time
Yeah.
a
True.
week ago
True.
in Athens and on down the list. I mean, yeah, I again, things would have to happen probably
Right.
for Georgia Tech to come out on top, but by no means would it be unthinkable. I think this is a game Georgia Tech surely has a shot in.
Yeah, and if it's anything like a Tech Notre Dame basketball game, everything's gonna be weird from the moment that game starts.
Right?
Uh, there's no
Yes,
such thing as a normal
man.
game
Yeah,
between these schools, at least in recent time. Notre Dame
yeah,
even they didn't beat us in volleyball a couple weeks ago, but at least we were like, okay, what's gonna happen? It's the same building that
right.
basketball's in. How weird is this gonna be?
Yeah,
Um, so
yeah. I
it
saw a
would
lot of weird Georgia Notre Dame games, basketball games for sure. Yeah,
yeah. So
yeah,
that'd be funny if it took on it'd be refreshing if it took on the life of that series instead
yeah,
of how the last couple games have gone,
yeah.
at least football wise. I guess we'll get a sense of this will be our first normal regular season game in Mercedes-Benz since the North Carolina game because all the other ones we've done have
Oh,
been
or
either
Chick-fil-A
have
games,
been
right?
Chick-fil-A slash a
Or
Aflac kickoff games.
Aflac kickoff games, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
between Clemson, Louisville, and yeah, Clemson and Louisville. I
The
was
North
thinking
Carolina game, that was regular season though,
that was
right?
that was saying that was saying that's a bit that was a normal regular season game
Oh, yeah,
where they
yeah,
just acted like it was a Tech home game inside the
right,
stadium. It
yeah,
wasn't the fact that we were playing a week one opener
right,
national game kind of thing. And
yeah.
I thought about the Tennessee game for a second, but that was not part of this existing contract. That was
No, yeah, that was actually a legitimate Chick-fil-A game. Yeah.
yeah, that was different. That was my first game as a student.
That was really
That was a quite a that was a
that
rude
was
introduction.
entertaining, man.
That was very I know. I wasn't fully emotionally pent up as I am now, considering that was literally the 2 weeks after I started classes at Tech.
Uh-huh.
So I hadn't built up the emotional damage quite
Uh,
yet, but it certainly helped.
your your
begin the
your
it
journey
began
as
the
a Tech fan was just beginning.
it
All
was it,
the
it, it began
scars
the
were
yeah,
yet to form.
it
Yeah.
began the process. It began the process. Um,
Daquan Marshall had like 5 touchdowns in the game or something
there's a lot
crazy.
of scoring in that game. Yeah, Taquan
Yeah,
had a good game. Nonetheless, that was a very good Taquan Marshall game.
yeah,
There's a lot going on in that. We lost on. I mean, hey, we went for the 2 point conversion. I can't. I
right.
don't. I don't blame Paul for trying to be risky against a ranked team.
Yeah, yeah.
Nonetheless, that's all. Most of pretty much everything I had. I don't know if there's anything last notes that come to mind about this game or
Um,
anything in the college football world that seems important to talk about.
let's see. No, I mean, yeah, like I said before, Georgia Tech obviously next month and a half has its work cut out, and
Yes.
but yeah, I think the interesting thing is that this season is Brent Key said it several times, I'm sure. At first it was teaching them to win, and then
Mhm.
now it's winning consistently,
Right. Right.
and they took the step of winning back to back ACC games, which
Yep.
I don't know if they hadn't done
In a long
at all. They
time. Yeah.
done once or twice, I guess, in
Yeah.
Brent's tenure, and now they've got a chance to really put a stamp on we maybe not we've arrived, but we're to be taken seriously,
Yeah.
and we're not a team. It's interesting. They're 5-2 with 5 games left. I think it would be meaningful them forget to it would be meaningful for whether you finish in the top 25 or not, or
Mhm.
certainly even whether you. I would think playing for the ACC title probably is out the window, but
Yeah.
getting to 7 wins in the regular season, knocking off a top 25 team when more, you'll have some chances there. Yeah, that would to me indicate, yeah, this team has continued to make progress and not
Yeah.
stayed at 6-6 or whatever it is. But yeah, so there's a lot on the table for Georgia Tech coming up here in the next and through the end of November.
Yeah. If ACC ball is to teach us anything, it's that none of these next 5 games will go as we think they're gonna go.
Yeah,
Also at the same time, so it's like,
right,
oh yeah, we'll beat Miami probably by 30, and then lose
right,
to VT by 20. You never know.
right.
I don't want to speak. I want us to win all the games. That's what I'm trying to speak into existence. But nonetheless, like expecting the unexpected, I think is
Right.
still kind of the move here. As I mean, even
Yeah.
the North Carolina game played out like that. It's just like, oh
Yeah.
yep,
We're
about to
we're
blow it.
we're
Oh,
not well. we'll never be fully clear of the coastal division. I
No,
think
hey, if you once you live
influence.
it, everyone. I mean, everyone gets coastal chaos now. The gates were unleashed when they got rid of it. That was the wrong decision. But
Yeah,
anyways, Ken, thanks so much for. It was always good to see you here.
yeah, Jeff, my
When you hang
pleasure.
out. I'm
Have a
sorry.
good time.
The other two wish they could have been here, but lives exist and things like that. So
Next time.
we'll get you back sooner rather than later.
All right.
Thanks, Ken.
Maybe Michelle and I can come on
Yes, what
together.
a lovely three. That'd be a very interesting
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I don't, I mean, we could talk a little bit about volleyball, but probably not enough at a very, very, very superficial level for
Oh
her.
yeah, it'd be fun. It'd be fun.
Yeah.
Anyways, all right. Thanks, Ken.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you.